anybody could take a whatever, Lady Gaga or Coldplay or whatever, and get them, whatever. It's just everyone wants to talk to them. That's easy. It's taking a smaller band that maybe doesn't have quite the following and telling their story and introducing them to the media in a way that is compelling and makes them want to write about them. And hopefully there's great music to go along with it. And that's the challenge, but I think it's actually more fun.
Mike, hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Question and the Answers podcast.
How's it going, Andy? Thanks
Doing
for having
great.
me.
Hey, yeah, no, it's so great to have you on here. Anyone who is not familiar, this is Mike Cubillos, who is the founder of Earshot Media. He's a veteran in the PR world, having had well over 20 years of experience working with countless artists. Mike, actually, why don't you do us all a favor and tell us a little bit about your experience and some of the artists you've worked with.
Yes. Well, I basically have been doing this forever. It feels like forever. I started out in the early 90s. After interning at a couple different record labels, I entered into the major label world and kind of did the PR thing there for a while. And then when I got laid off from my gig at Mercury Records, that was kind of the push I needed to sort of strike out on my own. At that point, I was kind of over the major label thing, and I think that was kind of the push I needed to do that. Had I not gotten laid off, I don't even know if I ever would have gone independent. But I figured, well, now's the time to try it, and I was able to kind of open shop with a nice, cool set of clients, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. Never looked back. Kind of started with I think Real Big Fish. Remember Mojo Records back in the day?
I do.
They had like Goldfinger, Real Big Fish, Cherry Poppin Daddies, all that. They were my first client, and from there I just sort of like made some headway in that kind of punk, ska, pop punk, emo, world. And I work all kinds of genres, but that's sort of been our bread and butter. And really, that stuff is always going to, have a place in my heart. So I personally dig the stuff, but yeah, we've since kind of moved on to a lot of other different genres. But I guess that's, a lot of people know us through our affiliation with, different punk labels that we've worked with, and, kind of that warped scene. And obviously we've worked together on your label, Sell the Heart, and through Tsunami Bomb and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, really, I kind of, the thing I really wanted to do with Earshot Media when I started was kind of take that experience that I had from the major label world, but really kind of do it in my own way. And it kind of taught me the things that I would want to do differently and what not to do. I kind of felt like working for the major labels, though it was a great experience. I've worked with a lot of really cool people, made a ton of friends, and a lot of the connections that I have today. And, some of the people I consider mentors are people that I met during those times. But it very much at times felt almost like a factory where they were just churning stuff out, and we were constantly juggling different things. And it was sort of that, like, throw it against the wall and see if it sticks, and if it doesn't, you move on to the next thing. And so I saw a lot of artists kind of get a little bit screwed that way. And if maybe the first week sales weren't great, or for whatever reason, the label would just kind of move on to the next priority. And I when I started Earshot, I just wanted to make sure it was very kind of artist friendly and not so reliant on like, first week sales and that kind of thing. And obviously the music industry was way different back then. But yeah, so that was kind of my sort of mission statement, was to just be kind of more artist friendly and kind of champion bands that maybe other people weren't, and that kind of, like I said, it just sort of snowballed from there, and I've been doing it since '97 now. So
Wow. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, it's been
like
a long time.
the mid to late '90s was definitely like that kind of ripe time when,
Yep.
so much had already broken. Like we were well
Yeah.
past Nirvana at that
Yep.
point. We were post Green Day explosion. Post
Exactly.
Warped Tour starting, and so really the underground had become the overground. So I
Yep.
think there was now so many new avenues for bands and labels to really take, because um, the magazines, the media outlets, and like the internet was kind of becoming a bigger deal at that point. So it wasn't just about MTV. It wasn't just about getting your stuff onto like a local news magazine or like the only magazines that were relevant at the time, like the weeklies or
Exactly.
something like that.
Yep.
And for anyone that doesn't necessarily understand what PR is, can you give just like a very brief overview of like what the core role of a person in your position is kind of supposed to do for an
Yep.
artist?
Yep. Well, I mean, the roles definitely changed over the years, and we do a lot of things that maybe back when I started weren't really part of our, whole job description. So kind of feel now that we have taken on a lot of the role of, some a lot of the duties that maybe like a label would have done back in the day, or even, to some extent management. We work with a lot of independent artists that are, either don't have managers or just starting out or whatever. So um, basically, though, we are kind of the liaison between the artist and the media. So, or whether it be the record company or whatever. PR's job would basically be to be in constant contact with different media outlets and writers and editors and bloggers and TV bookers and pitch artists. So we try to get reviews and other kind of media coverage. There's no touring right now, but when that starts up again, tour press is a big part of what we do. So if a band's on tour, we kind of follow that routing and hit up all the tour markets and try to place coverage in advance of the shows and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's always changing now. We do a lot of, social media stuff and playlisting, pitching, which was not a thing before. So it's, definitely, it's one of the challenges is just trying to kind of adapt and change and kind of learn to that part of this whole thing we do now is just taking on these new roles and wearing many different hats. And but it's kind of fun too. It keeps us on our feet,
Yeah, I mean,
on our toes.
it's a huge job. And I mean, gosh, I mean, I've tried to do my own PR for bands that I've been in, from the beginning days of being like a kid in college or high school, where you're just, reaching out to people,
Yeah.
it's like, hey man, you want to write about my band, or you want to like review my album or something like that,
Yep.
to as far as trying to do something more legit on my own. And that involves getting all of the copies made, all of the, press kits put together, and making all the phone calls, sending all the emails, waiting as patiently as you possibly can to get a reply. I mean, good God, man, like
Yeah.
anyone in your shoes with that type of like patience is like a saint, and I understand your frustration. Like I know that I've seen you, post about it on your social media, where you're just like, man, I would just love one reply today or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's
I
true.
mean,
Yeah.
you're definitely
It,
not the only person who I've seen go through that. And gosh, man, I wouldn't want to have to go through that. So it's it's kind of it's kind of good that you get paid to do that, you know? 'Cause
Yeah.
otherwise it's like, dude, like I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, you know?
Yeah, it's a tough gig, man. And you know, there are a lot of bands like you that have done it themselves, and to a certain extent, you can do that. And it just gets to a point where, as you know, the band gets bigger, or you start getting busier. You know, at times it makes sense to maybe farm that stuff out to somebody else, so you don't have to deal with that stuff, and you can focus just on you know, the art and in your case the label side of things. But yeah, it's a tough gig. You really got to have a thick skin. You're dealing with a lot of rejection. You're dealing with in some cases an artist or a manager who maybe doesn't really get, you know, kind of what you're up against, and maybe would have unrealistic expectations. But you know, thankfully most people kind of get it. And you know, it takes a lot of persistence, but when you do land that great, you know, thing, whether it's a review on some big cool blog, or you know, or a big TV spot or whatever, it's just like the best feeling, and it kind of keeps you going back for more and more. So it's tough,
Definitely.
but yeah.
Well, you know, I can definitely speak to my own experience working with you, like you said, on a couple of different levels, right? So not only were you the PR agent for Tsunami Bomb with our last record, but you were also you've also worked with a couple of the bands through Sell the Heart.
Yep.
And you know, the experience I know essentially is the same with respect to like the output, but it's not always necessarily the same in terms of like what we get back. And there's a lot of factors involved in that, you know.
Yep.
So much of it has to do with, you know, is the band already a band that has a name for themselves? Because, you know, people who work at these media outlets, you know, they're trying to figure out what's going to bring people to their page, so they
Right.
have to be a little bit more, you know, discerning about, okay, well, yeah, I'll do a piece on Tsunami Bomb, but I've never heard of middle-aged queers, so
Right.
I can't necessarily give that same space to them, you know?
Yep.
And I mean, that's all understandable. It's business. I mean, we all wish that maybe they all had time and money and energy and resources to give to all
Right.
the bands, but unfortunately, that's just not the case. So,
Yeah.
you know, we
Yeah.
have to kind of, I think, to your point, really keep our expectations realistic, especially within the scope of who it is we're talking about here, you know.
Right.
And you know, on that note, I mean, as a person who basically runs your own show, I mean, I don't know, do you have any other employees that work with you or partners?
It's just me. I mean, for several years, I had another guy, Jose, who worked with me. He's not with me anymore, but you know, we're still good buddies. And then after that, I had a guy named Tony, who a lot of people maybe know from New Noise magazine. He
Mhm.
was one of the editors over there, Tony Schrum.
Mhm.
He worked with me as well. But now it's just me, and I honestly think people ask me like, God, how do you juggle so much stuff? And for one, I just think honestly that goes back to my major label experience, where I was constantly juggling like multiple genres and different acts, and you really got to kind of uh, I don't want to say compartmentalize, but you know, you're just dealing with a lot of different balls in the air, a lot of moving parts. But I kind of thrive off it. You know, when it's not like that, sometimes I'm like I get bored. So
Right.
I kind of actually dig it. But kind of going back to your point about the, you know, dealing with different size bands and kind of the expectations from what, you know, what to expect from the media. I tell people all the time that I believe it's actually much harder, and I think takes more skill as a publicist to work with smaller developing acts. And in some ways, it's more gratifying too. I kind of feel like some of these bigger bands, like, you know, anybody could take a whatever, Lady Gaga or Coldplay or whatever, and get them, you know, whatever. It's just everyone wants to talk to them. That's easy. It's taking a smaller band that maybe doesn't have quite the following, and telling their story and introducing them to the media in a way that is compelling and makes them want to write about them. and hopefully it's, there's great music to go along with it, and that's the challenge. But I think it's actually more fun to work kind of more developing acts, honestly. And that was, um, again, one of the reasons why I really enjoyed going on my own and becoming independent and being able to take on projects that I believed in, and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely challenging.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. And to your point about like Lady Gaga or like acts like U2 or Metallica or something like that. It's like,
Yeah,
there's already people going out of their way to write about them in any number of facets. I mean, there's like whole
yeah,
podcasts dedicated to like breaking down their albums or something like that. So
it's,
there's no lack of content about a band like that. But a band like Unconditional Arms or even Tsunami Bomb, or like any of the bands that you work with on like Wiretap Records or something like that,
right.
like,
Yep.
yeah, they may have like their own fan base, especially like in like the general region that they're at, but
Yep.
your goal is to kind of elevate them to a much bigger audience. And I mean, obviously, given now that we can't be touring and everything,
Yeah.
that even becomes even more challenging, because if like say Tsunami Bomb had the ability to go and play areas that we hadn't played since the band got back together,
Right.
that would be a huge deal, because there are actually some people that don't realize that the band's back together.
Right.
And I mean, it's weird. Like every couple months, like the band kind of comes. It's like, oh yeah, no, the band got back together a few years ago, and
Right.
we have a new album out. Actually, it's like, really, you have a new album
Right.
out? It's like, yeah, dude. Like it's been on,
I've noticed that. Yeah.
Kerrang and New Noise and whatever. And thanks to Mike for that. But it's I gotta say, like, it's a incredibly tough job. And like certainly all the bands that I've had work with you through the label and Tsunami Bomb, like, we genuinely thank you for everything you do, because we know how tough it is. So
Oh, thanks,
hopefully
man. Yeah.
hopefully you get the same level of gratification or gratitude, I mean, from most of the artists that you work with. I understand that.
Yeah. I would.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I would say so. Yeah. I mean, occasionally, you get some knuckleheads that are kind of, have delusions of grandeur, kind of thing. But at the same time, they're really passionate about what they're doing. And I
Right.
understand that they, or their management or whoever's on their team really wants the best. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, it's like a family, all the people I work with. I love, working with you and with Rob at Wiretap and all my clients in Vogue Records, Real Big Fish, all these guys. I kind of feel like it's a big family. We don't see each other a lot now, especially now without shows, um, but people are super cool. And um, I try to steer clear of the assholes, really.
Well, that's good. I actually wanted to kind of ask you, and feel free to not name names or anything, but
Yeah.
has there been like any artists that you've worked with that kind of in hindsight you're like, man, I really wish that I hadn't worked with these people. I mean, I'm
Uh,
assuming that you have, but I mean, and again, you don't have to name any names, but I mean,
yeah,
can you maybe like dig into like a little bit about the experience with them and like why it was frustrating?
sure. Yeah, I mean, I've had to do, several years ago, I had a string of bands that kind of just seemed to have drama follow them wherever they went. And there was definitely a lot of like damage control. You go into crisis mode, and that teaches you a lot as a publicist to sort of how to navigate those waters. Is it fun? No, it's not fun. But you definitely learn from every experience like that. Definitely won't name any names, but yeah, I mean, there's those moments where you wake up and you're like, uh-oh, like there's something, they've done something again, and how are we going to deal with this? And, you powwow with the label and the management and all that. And really it just comes down to, I don't know, I guess just, being a good person.
Right.
I mean, there's some shitty people out there who do shitty things, and um, you know, like I said, I try to steer clear of that. But in some cases where I'm working with labels or whatever, sometimes you're given a project that you're working that, and maybe there's like one person in the band that kind of ruins it, where the rest of the guys are super cool. But it doesn't make it easy, and people like that, you just are like, why are you wasting so much energy being a douche? Like, it's just so much easier to be a nice person.
It is.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't understand it, but thankfully, that's few and far between. Back in my major label days, I definitely worked some artists, which we could talk about later off
Sure.
off the air. But yeah, I've dealt with a lot of big egos and big personalities, and you know, just even fellow label coworkers, or asshole managers, that kind of thing. But for the most part, people are pretty cool and they get it. And we're all in this because we love music, and I think there's that kind of kinship amongst us. So um, yeah, that keeps me going. It's just trying to steer clear of the drama
Sure.
is what I like.
Yeah, I guess conversely, uh, are there any artists or labels that you just you can't help but say, man, like these are like the ones that I've had the greatest experience and had the best, like maybe not even so much of like in terms of like the outcomes that you had, but just in general, like
Yeah,
they were the most pleasurable to work with, from your end. Like, I mean,
yeah.
you don't, again, you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but I'd
Yeah,
love to
no,
hear
I
them.
mean, there's so many, like so many different bands. I mean, you've always been super awesome to work with.
Oh,
Dominic
well,
was
thanks.
great. Wiretap, I love Rob. He's awesome. He's not only a nice guy, but he's just impeccable. Ability to, like, bring in bands that are just amazing. So I love working with him. Uh, Nick at In Vogue Records, awesome dude, super cool. Uh, Gosh, I know No Hope Records out of Philadelphia, another indie label. They've got some great bands. Um, I know I'm leaving some people out, but
And that's okay.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, I got
I
to
don't mean
look
to
at my
put you on the
list.
spot, but
No, no, no. But I mean, the Real Big Fish guys, their manager Vince, who I've known forever. Those guys have been super loyal, and I've probably seen them more than any other band, and they still, it's a thrill to see them live. It's just a fun show. Um, so just yeah, I mean, so you surround yourself with good people, and I kind of feel like good, they sort of attract each other. And
yeah,
so right now, I would say that like every single band that I'm working with is like just, you know, solid, and, you know, no complaints, just a breeze to work with. And it's a pleasure working with everyone. Yeah.
great.
Right now, knock on wood. Let's hope it stays that way. But
Yeah, I mean, to kind of touch a little bit on, the current state of affairs that we have to work with,
yes.
I mean, because bands can't play live, so that obviously changes the way that bands have to approach um, maintaining a relationship with their audience, as well as building any new audience.
Right.
So, we have the options of creating new content either via our social media platforms, maybe doing videos. We can even be recording and releasing new records. None of that has to necessarily slow down too much, right? But
Yep.
as far as your role and the way that you can make an impact with that, I mean, what are right now like the biggest, I guess, challenges that you're facing? I mean, besides the obvious that bands aren't playing shows. I mean,
Yeah.
has has the has the media that you work with been much more difficult to break into for the even like the various level of bands? Like, maybe is
Yeah.
there more saturation right now? Like, tell me about that.
It's kind of ebbed and flowed, I guess. There have been sort of stages, especially through this whole Corona thing, and even with the protests and the Black Lives Matter and all of that. It's just been a super chaotic time for everybody, and that's really made us have to kind of adapt and be creative, and kind of know when to step back a little bit and say maybe this isn't the best time to pitch something like this, or especially in the early days of everything, it was tough. This A lot of this seemed kind of trivial, and so it was kind of a balancing act of trying to be respectful and acknowledge, that there's some crazy stuff going on right now, but also, knowing that we all kind of have this expectation that we still got to do our jobs.
Right.
So I think just for me, it was just trying to figure out how to kind of continue to do my job in a respectful way that maybe wasn't like disregarding everything else that's going on around us. And I think we were all in the same boat. A lot of writers, editors, label people. We were all just trying to figure out how to continue to navigate, through these kind of new waters we're in. And so, eventually I kind of feel like things settled down, and in many ways, people were just so stressed out that um, they kind of welcomed the sort of distraction of being able to write about music or whatever. So I kind of feel like actually lately I feel like it's like been really good. Like there's, I think in some ways, a lot of, especially like regional media, it used to be so reliant on bands touring and who's coming to town, and maybe, bring up Metallica again. Let's say they were touring, the LA Weekly. Who are they going to cover? My Little Band or Metallica? So now I feel like it's opened up opportunities for smaller bands in a lot of ways. And a lot of the coverage, I think, has gone from being more like event oriented around shows that might be happening that week to more, album reviews or, kind of essays from bands on how they're dealing with this whole pandemic quarantine thing. Or so I think in some ways it's kind of opened up and created new opportunities for developing acts. And it's forced us, like I said, to be creative in pitching new angles, and it's forced artists to be more creative with videos. Now they can't really hang out, so they're trying to find out new ways to create content that is in keeping with like social distancing and all that. Or things like live streams, which obviously there's been a kind of a glut of that. But I think there's a lot of bands that are still doing like really cool creative things, and it just takes a team effort, between the publicist and the band and management or whatever, to really just kind of figure out new ways to get your stuff out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is there anything that you feel is working better than anything else? Like, for instance, if you were to say start working with a younger band who hasn't had a ton of experience with getting their name out there, like what would you think maybe would be the single thing that they should be doing now to make sure that they get the most impact, if there was anything you could pick?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely starts with, quality, just everything quality music. You got to have everything. You got to need quality content, quality social media. You got to be consistent with updating your social media. But I think it really all starts with just have killer tunes, write amazing music. And I think with that, obviously you still need all those other things, but I think that is the key. And good music's always going to find a place. I still like to believe that. I know a lot of people think, well, there have been a lot of artists that deserved, to be way bigger than they are. And that's always a shame. But I think for the most part, great music is going to find its audience. So just making sure you are in all the places where they're likely to maybe run across your music. I know so many bands that maybe don't update, their social media that often, or they don't even have contact information, on their Facebook or whatever. So really just, and also keeping the content coming, a steady stream of content, whether it's, Instagram stories or, like daily, in studio live streams or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of things people could be doing to stay engaged with the audience in lieu of touring right now.
Right.
So it's just a matter of trying to figure those things out. And uh, so that's what I would say. If bands, there is some I guess positives in all of this, that a lot of bands now have the time to engage more with their audience in new ways, short of touring. And so I think the bands that can continue to be creative and come out with quality content are going to be in the best shape right now. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly had plenty of conversations with, you know, people from both music, from bands, from labels, from, you know, different zines.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I agree. I agree that the content is key right now. The quality obviously is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And how do you gauge that? Because some people don't necessarily care if it's premium and like 4K and, you know,
Right.
everything's done with like, you know, 20 hours of editing or 200 hours worth of editing. I mean,
Yeah.
just as long as it's decent, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
as long
And
as it's not,
when I say quality too, I don't mean like technologically,
right.
you know, perfect in that sense. I just mean compelling content that is, interesting for the viewer to watch. And, and that's a tough thing to gauge, who am I to say what is compelling and what's not? But I think that as long as you kind of know your audience and stay engaged with them in some way, I think that's, you're using this time wisely. I don't know. I was just reading, I mean, it's totally out of our scene that we're kind of in, but did you read that article about Melissa Etheridge, how she has been doing these daily live streams, I think at 3 o'clock, and she charges $50 a month, and she's been making like crazy money since this whole pandemic thing started. She built a studio in her house, and I guess her wife is like in TV or something. But they've just gotten super creative, and now they've built up this cool thing that I think a lot of other artists should be looking into, because it doesn't take a lot to kind of engage with your fans like that. And that's, it was pretty impressive. I'll have to send you the link on that. But yeah, I think it was
Yeah. I
on
mean, not
Forbes.
to, I'm sorry.
No, I think I saw it on Forbes or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, it actually does ring a bell. I think I did see a blip about that like a few months ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And she's definitely not the only one. I mean, not to get too off track of the PR stuff, but like,
Yeah.
I think you're definitely somebody that could certainly answer some of these questions. Like in terms of like the way that that bands and artists are able to kind of keep that relationship going and even like keep a revenue stream going, there are so many more avenues now than we had, even 5 years ago.
Yep.
Like there's Patreon, there's subscription services through Bandcamp, there's there's Twitch,
Yeah.
there's something called Discord, which I still don't
Yeah.
really know much about.
Yeah.
And then, if you're even savvy enough, like you could just build your own app if you wanted to. Like, I mean, you could just build a website and then like
Exactly.
put a paywall in there and then put your content up and then boom, there you go. But,
Yep.
I'm a huge advocate for that.
Yeah.
And, I'm not the type of musician that can constantly turn out new content at a steady enough clip to really warrant that.
Right.
But if I was, that is absolutely the thing that I would be doing right now, especially if I relied on this as my main source of income. And,
Exactly.
like, here's a question for you. And, I've asked some people this and I've gotten very mixed responses, but, do you think that part of the reason why some artists don't do this is because they don't think that I don't even know if I can phrase this the right way. It's like, do you think that they just don't deserve it? Like, do you think that it's not like thoughtful enough on their end, or are they asking too much from their audience to pay like 5, 10, 20, even $1 a month to have access to like their stuff when
Right.
we all know that if they really want it, they can get it for free,
Right.
like
Yeah.
if you're savvy enough, you can just go grab it and just pull it off and have it on your computer. And plenty of people do that. Right.
Yep.
But honestly, like, and I'll let you answer in just a second, but like,
Yeah.
honestly, I think that there are plenty of people that will absolutely pay $1, $3, $5, $10, even 25 or
Yeah.
50, like for
Yep.
like Melissa Etheridge, you know,
Yep.
they'll pay that money as long as it's good, you know, and steady and fits in with their taste, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends who your audience is. Like, I think someone like a Melissa Etheridge obviously has an older fan base with, you know, more, I guess, disposable income and that kind of thing.
True.
So I think that in her case, you know, what I forget, what did I say? $50 a month, I think, is what they were charging. And then they have an option to do like single, you could pay kind of a la carte. But the article was explaining that most, I think it was like 80% opt to do the $50 a month thing.
It's probably a lot
And
cheaper. Yeah.
yeah, and then it's become this whole thing where the fans can interact with each other, and they've created this little community of people. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I mean, we're kind of in this sort of like punk world where I think I get that a lot of bands, you know, even the whole you know, bands will, you know, their van will break down and they'll have to, you know, start a GoFundMe or something. And I get it. Like, even as a music fan, you know, you can only see so many of those that you're like, oh man, like another band asking for money. But I think that it goes back to, you know, the quality and not, you know, screwing your fans over and charging them an arm and a leg. But if you're willing to, you know, if you have that relationship with your audience and you have quality, you know, stuff that you're putting out there, and you're not just, it's not like a cash grab. I think that's the difference, you know. Or you know, even you know, talking about other ways to generate revenue during this time where you can't tour. You know, I've noticed a lot of bands are kind of upping their merch, you know, game right now and things like that. And I don't know. I think it just I don't think there's any shame in, uh, you know, charging fans for quality stuff. If you're out there, you know, and I think if you're a certain level band that tours and you can't right now, your fans are starved to see you. And I, you know, I guess it's all just in how it's done. And I guess what, you know, a band that doesn't have a very big following, you know, obviously you're not in a position to really charge fans for this kind of thing. But you know, at a certain level, I think that if you have the goods and the catalog and the ability to do that, you know, I don't see why that's any different than charging them to come see you live. You know?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I
I don't know if that
imagine, I
answers.
mean, go ahead.
No, I don't know if I kind of got off the topic there, but
No, no, I think that that was a really, I think you brought up some really good points. I mean, with regards to like the Melissa Etheridge thing, like I'm sure that, you know, especially based on the fact that, you know, I'm sure she's very well off, and, you know, she's made a very good living for herself. And if her partner, you know, is in TV and probably understands like the finer workings of like how to properly do something and do it well, you know,
right.
then yeah, I'm sure that they can ask for a premium, you know, for a
Hmm.
premium price. And she does have a huge fan base, so she can ask for those things. But, you know, if like say Tsunami Bomb, for example, I mean, if we were in a position to be able to do that,
Yeah.
I don't think that we could ask our fans to really to pay even close to that, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know, and I'm not even suggesting that we would even do this, but I'm just saying, like,
Right.
if we relied on this as our steady source of income, I would venture to say that we could probably legitimately ask our fans for maybe $5 a month, you know,
Right.
to have at least some steady content coming their way, you know,
Right.
which would be great. You know, it'd be
Yeah.
better than nothing, you know, but,
Right.
you know, thankfully we are not in that position.
Right.
And I don't know, for anyone who's paying attention to this and, you know, thinks you should do it, in my opinion, do it. Like,
Yeah.
nothing's holding you back. Just do it in a thoughtful way. You know, I think that
Right.
that's really what it boils down to, is do it in a way that's thoughtful and genuine and
Yep.
fits in with who you are as an artist and what it is you're trying to do, you know?
Totally.
Yeah. And
I agree.
don't sell yourself short either, you know, because your art is your labor, you know, so you should get paid for it, you know. But
Yep.
anyway, we can
Well,
have.
no, and your fans want to support you, you know, and there's,
Well, yeah, I think that's something that a lot of bands don't really realize, you know.
yeah, yeah. But I get, you know, there's definitely some, you know, I think that there are some artists that are a little kind of gun shy about, you know, asking that of their fans. But I think that it's kind of a time that we're in that we really need to kind of rethink the artist fan relationship, um, and that's just one new way of keeping that connection going. But there's like countless. I mean, I'm sure someone out there right now is coming up with some new great idea of how to stay connected with their artists, you know. But I think again, it just goes back to, you know, being creative and coming up with new ways to kind of keep that going, not just the connection with the fans, but the revenue stream,
Right.
which, you know, and I know it sounds like you got, I mean, like Tsunami Bomb, most of you guys probably have all your, you know, your day gigs and all that, which allows you to be able to kind of do the music thing, right? But
Yeah.
um, so I mean, it must be hard for you guys not to be able to be out on the road though at times. And,
Yeah. The biggest problem that we're facing with all of this as Tsunami Bomb is that, you know, we didn't really get an opportunity to really get out there and support the record that just came out. And it's the first record from the band in, like, I think it was like 11 years or something like that.
yeah,
Or no, 14 years, something like that. Yeah, like 14 years. So, you know, the band had already been back for about 4 years.
yeah,
And so it took us the better part of a year to record it and to get it all done. And then to get it out, it took like another few months. So, you know, it was like this huge waiting period for not only us but for the fans. And we've managed to play, I think it's 6 shows to support it, something like that. And
yeah,
you know, we were hoping to have had at least a solid double digits, you know. um so I mean, you know, for us it's not nearly as big of a deal, but it's
yeah,
still, it made a difference, you know. We weren't able to hit up some of the places that we were intending to hit. And um
yep,
I mean, I can only imagine like what it must be like for like bands like the Bomb Pops is a great example. Like their album literally came out, I think, when Shelter in Place happened, you know,
yeah,
and they had plenty of tours lined up, and so now they can't do any of that. And
yeah,
you know, I mean, thankfully they're kind of part of a well-oiled machine with Fat Records.
hmm,
There's already a pretty good name, you know, just based on the label itself. But and you know, the
exactly,
Bomb Pops also have a very good name for themselves too. I mean, they've built a good audience. So hopefully it's sold well, you know.
yeah,
Hopefully at least it's made its money back and then some. But
right,
I mean, gosh, I can only imagine what it would have been like,
yeah,
you know, for them to have been able to tour behind it. Or even like another band on Fat, like Bad Cop, like they released their, I mean, a lot of bands have released their
yep,
records and they're not touring, you know.
yep,
But like even on Sell the Heart, you know, like the ones that we've released, not all those artists even play a lot of shows, you know. I
hmm,
mean, like Unconditional Arms wasn't going to be able to play a lot of shows anyway, but now
hmm,
they can't play any, you know.
yep,
So now
exactly,
there's even less of a chance to sell as many, at least from a live show perspective, you know. But thankfully we've been selling some. But
yeah.
um
Yeah, I mean, I was a little worried, you know, as far as what I do in terms of, you know, with bands not being able to get out on the road, like what that would mean for, you know, people like me, in terms of, you know, different projects and stuff. But thankfully I've found that a lot of people are just, I mean, they're not touring obviously, but they're still putting out music. And um, you know, there've been a lot of great records that have come out the last few months, some of which I've been lucky to work. And you know, I think that it's not stopping people from putting music out, you know.
yeah.
And hopefully when this is all over, there's going to be a pent up demand to get back out and see bands and support bands. And, you know, I don't know how many venues are still going to be standing, but
Yeah.
that's a whole other issue. But yeah, I think we just need to like kind of hang in there, and hopefully this all ends soon.
I agree. Fingers crossed, and you know,
Yeah.
keep. I mean, you know, as long as everyone does what little they can do by like, signing, whatever, you know, like signing up for like mailing lists and like trying to get like your name onto, get laws passed to protect venues.
Exactly.
Maybe chipping in a couple of bucks to your favorite local venue or bar,
Yep.
buying a record from your favorite band, buying a t-shirt, maybe signing up for their Patreon for a couple dollars a month. I mean, and it's not to say that plenty of people aren't hurting and can't even do that. And
Yeah.
that's totally fine,
Right.
but, you
Yeah.
know,
If you can. Yeah. If you.
if you can, please do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have there been a lot of venues up in the Bay Area that have been in? I thought was it Slim's or I don't know. I thought, or maybe I read somewhere that there were a couple venues that were either closing or in danger of closing. I don't know. I know it's
There's
happening all
plenty,
over the country.
there's plenty that are in dire straits right now.
Yeah.
Slim's closed, but apparently Slim's was going to close anyway, is what I heard.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that they had already planned to close it. I believe it was 6 months after the time that
Ah.
they announced it, but they just
Oh.
decided to close early instead.
Oh.
So I
Got
don't
it.
think that the pandemic had a direct effect on that.
Right.
But nonetheless, like, I mean, Bottom of the Hill, I mean, Gilman, which is all
Yeah.
volunteer run. I mean, shoot, like, I mean, the Live Nation places, I don't think are really that, concerned about it,
Right.
but smaller places like Bottom of the Hill or Great American Music Hall still, we need those places, and
Yeah.
be a shame if they went away. But,
Yep.
well, yeah, man. We've covered a lot of ground here, and
Yeah.
now for a little bit more of like the fun questions.
Yep. Yep.
I'd love to know about some of the artists that you personally, outside of Earshot, are really particularly fond of, and maybe people don't know about, and like give me an idea. I mean, new bands, older bands, but maybe just some bands that no one's heard of that you think people should know about.
Right. I'm so bad at that, man, that I tend to like, I kind of get caught up in the stuff that I'm working. But I have been able to, kind of obviously with like Spotify and things like that, I'm constantly searching out new stuff, and there is a lot of great music. I guess it would be a mix of like stuff I am working right now
That's
and
totally fine.
other stuff. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm digging this Colombian artist actually named Loyal Lobos. Have you heard of her?
No.
She's pretty cool. Chicano Batman, another LA band that I'm digging. Working a band called Catholic Guilt right now out of Australia. I don't know if you've heard of them, but their new album is freaking great. I mean,
Yeah, they're on Wiretap.
they're on Wiretap. They have kind of, it's funny because the first time I heard it, I'm like, sort of a Midnight, remember Midnight Oil, the
Oh,
band
sure.
out of Australia? Kind of almost like a little bit of a vibe like that. And it was funny because that was my first thought. And then I saw that referenced in one of the write-ups, and I'm like, I knew it. But so I'm really digging them. I don't know. My tastes are very eclectic. I still go back to a lot of the classic stuff that I loved growing up. I'm a huge Pixies fan. The Clash, Velvet Underground, Ramones, those are kind of my cornerstone artists, I guess, that I grew up listening to. Who else? I don't know. I mean, there's so much out there. The names escape me right now. But what
No,
about
I
you,
know.
man? What are you digging?
Oh man, like, I mean, lately, the album of the year, as far as I'm concerned, is the new record from Hum.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's a killer album.
it's
Yes,
incredible. Yeah, I
it
mean,
is.
that album dropped at the exact right time that I needed it, and
Yeah.
that's a band that I've loved since back in like high school when they
Yep.
first came out, and I had no idea that they were dropping it, and then they surprised everyone with it, and I was just like, this is
It
exactly what
sounds
I needed.
insane. Yeah.
And
I
it's
dig that.
so good and it's so huge sounding.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm one of those, guys that kind of come from the Billy Corgan school of rock where it's like
Yeah.
big sound guitars, layers
Yep.
and layers and layers. I love that shit.
Yep.
And this album hits all of those marks for me.
I
It's a,
agree.
it's a
Yeah.
little bit doomy. It's a little bit like sludgy. It's got that cool atmosphere, like shoegaze kind of vibe to it.
Yep.
But it's got that real Hum sound. and they're not a huge band. I mean, like, they're big, with respect to a lot of other bands, but they're not this huge
Yeah.
monolithic band like Smashing Pumpkins or something. But
Yeah. They're kind of more of a cult. It's funny because they seem to be kind of like a musician's musician, like
totally, yeah.
like I know so many musicians that dig that band, and I mean I was around when they kind of first came out,
Hmm.
and I was actually lucky enough to work one of their album vinyl reissues a couple years ago. But yeah, it was really cool to see them coming back, and I actually really dig the new X album that came out a couple months ago.
Okay.
Great album. Have you heard it? It's so good.
I haven't, and you'll have to excuse me. Like, I'm not a. It's not that I'm not a fan. I'm just really
Yeah.
not familiar with them. I mean, I
Yeah,
know who
yeah,
they are, but I'm
yeah.
just really not that familiar with that band.
Yeah, I kind of grew up on them. My brother kind of turned me on to them, my older brother, and being from LA, it's sort of like I don't know. I guess
Well, I
one
mean,
of
they
them.
have an album called Los Angeles, so
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. So, but hearing that record, kind of in the same way that you talked about Hum, it just sounds just so vibrant and just kind of like you said, the right album for the right time, and it just felt good to hear them back with just sounding kind of. I mean, I don't even know how many albums deep they are in now, but to come out with a record that sounded that kind of still, I don't know, kind of the sense of urgency, and it just sounded so good to hear them back. So,
oh
and I've
yeah.
been reading reviews and stuff, and they're getting great press. So,
I mean, like I said,
good on
like
them.
for me, it's the album of the year so far, and there's been a lot of really good records this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really digging Koricki, which is Ian MacKaye, and
Oh,
Joe Lally, and
yeah.
it's the new album that they put out on Discord.
Oh, I'll have to
Um,
listen to that.
I mean, I'm a huge Fugazi fan, so
Yeah.
anything that any of those guys. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with some of their other projects, but there's another band that Brendan and Joe are involved with called the Mesthetics, and
Okay.
it's like total instrumental, like kind of weird psycho surf, like
Oh, wow.
post rock stuff. It's
Yeah.
really good. They have a ripper guitar player in that band, like
Nice. What are they called?
madman, dude. They're so good. Um, and then the new
What is
Pears
that
record,
band called? What's that band called?
they're called the Mesthetics.
Mesthetics. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll have to check
I'll
that
send
out.
you the link. But
Yeah.
and then the new Pears record I thought was just brilliant. The new Suicide
Yep.
Machines record is brilliant. Um, I'd be remiss if I didn't call out, like, I'm loving the new Kill Lincoln record that's about to
Yes.
drop or has
Yep.
dropped. I mean, I'm a big fan of like what they're doing. Uh,
Yeah.
One of my favorite bands is this band called Catbite out of Philadelphia.
Oh,
Ska,
nice.
like kind of a ska revival, like kind of soul driven ska band. But
Love
anyway,
that.
those are some of my favorites. But
Oh, nice, man.
yeah,
You've given me a lot to go back and look.
yeah,
Kill Lincoln for sure. Love those guys. The record comes out Friday. So.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, I mean, speaking of records, I mean, this is kind of like one of my loaded questions that I throw out to people as well. But I'm always just genuinely curious if you had to name 5 records that you'd be like trapped on a desert island with, like, can you name 5 that you'd really love to be with?
Um, for sure. I mean, there's way too many, and I know I'm gonna list 5, and then when we're done here, I'm gonna be like, oh shit, I forgot to mention that one.
Sure.
It's always changing, but I think I always go back to Pixies, Surfer Rosa. That album was a huge kind of moment for me when it came out, and I think it really changed my life in like many ways. I think they sort of informs the kind of music I like, that sort of slightly off kilter pop, kind of noisy pop stuff. Um, and so I would say Surfer Rosa. I would say The Clash, London Calling for sure. That one I feel like would probably be on a lot of people's top 5 lists, but
It's been mentioned
um,
before.
yeah, but I would say that one for sure. I would say Rocket to Russia, the Ramones. Another great album for me that just reminds me of kind of that kind of coming of age when I was sort of getting out of like whatever crappy music I was into as a little kid, and kind of discovering, you know, punk rock and these crazy New York dudes with long hair, that album was big for me. My brother brought home a think it was like an Italian import of the album, and so that was a big one for me. What else here? I don't know, like Velvet Underground and Nico, kind of pivotal album for me too. Dig everything those guys did, and you know, a lot of I hear their influence in so many bands even now. Um, it's crazy for me to listen to those records and think, and like they still sound so kind of. I mean, to me, there's like a direct parallel between like them and maybe even like Guided by Voices or you know, there's just so many bands I think that were heavily influenced by them. They were doing some rad stuff. How many is that? I think
That's
that's
four.
three. Four. What would my fifth be? I guess I don't know. Like I really did, I'm a fan of Matthew Sweet.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, I actually was lucky to work with him at one of the label gigs that I had. But that Girlfriend record to me is just like kind of this power pop, you know, masterpiece. Um, I dig the guitar. He brought in all these great, you know, kind of session people, and I think Richard Lloyd from Television, you know, plays on the album, and um, I don't know. I just that record kind of is for me like kind of the ultimate breakup album.
Hmm.
It's yeah. If you're not familiar with that one, you can go back and listen. It's good stuff.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
there you go. There's five. I don't know.
Hey, hey, that's a great list of records, man. I mean,
Yeah,
I know that that's a hard question to answer. You know,
it is because it changes all the time.
it truly does. It's an ever evolving question. I mean, it's hard to pick just five, but I kind of throw it in there just to kind of put people on the spot a little bit, but
Yep,
make you
all
sweat a
good.
little bit. But man, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm hopefully some people gain a little bit of information about what it's like to work with and understand a little bit more like what your role is, so that maybe you'll get some more clients from this. We'll see. Yeah.
Hey man, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and always good, you know, working with you and all that good stuff. So I
Great.
appreciate you having me on.